Welcome to the Grow As We Go podcast. I'm Sam, breathwork and embodiment coach, muse, and self-growth junkie.
And I'm Anthony, your co-host, transformational men's coach, and general question asker.
Here we create space for natural, vulnerable, and deeply connecting conversations on life as it happens, wisdom I've picked up along the way, and tools to truly enjoy this beautiful life you've been given. I want to appreciate you for being here, whether this is your first time or you've been here since the beginning. We love feedback here, so leave your thoughts and takeaways from this episode in the reviews section of this podcast. This also helps the podcast become a bit more relevant in search reviews. Another way you can support this podcast is by following me on Instagram at Samantha__Charles and take a screenshot of this episode to share it on your social media and share your takeaways so that your junkie friends can come and get their fix too. Hello and welcome to another episode of Grow As We Go. I'm Sam.
And I'm Anthony.
And today we are going to talk about feminine and masculine energy.
Yeah, this is like a part 2/2.5/3.
Yeah, we've talked about this before.
Right. But in this context, we're talking about it because we had a really cool conversation. What are the other episodes that we've talked about masculine and feminine in, by the way?
Well, I know that I did one. It was a while back. It was episode 5. Yeah. And the title of that is Energies. Like Mother Earth and Father Sky, and I think that I don't know, maybe I titled it like it esoterically. Yeah, very esoteric. So I think that's the only one that we actually have recorded. I know that we've talking about it on the podcast and have a long list of it, but anyway, we had a conversation yesterday where you were asking me about what I thought about feminine energy and masculine energy in terms of devotion.
Yeah.
And what that looks like in equality or,
Yeah, especially in okay, do you feel like we're devoted to each other in the same level? But I used a bunch of different words that meant the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I heard you say that got a little repetitive.
Yeah, well, I mean, you had asked if I felt that your level of devotion to me and my level of devotion to you was equal. And then you used several different words that to me mean the same thing. Yeah, it was do they feel equal? Does it feel balanced? Does it feel
similar?
Something. There was another word. But
it's the English teacher in me.
Yeah. But I remember you saying that and I was like, well, no. I don't think that it's equal. Mm-hmm. And, because the level of devotion that was a really interesting conversation, I thought, because the idea of devotion, what does that even mean? And what I was saying was, how do you quantify a level of devotion?
Right.
And what does that look like? I think the things that you do would be a quantifying factor. Sure. And I think you do more than I do.
Yeah.
And so,
I agree.
Yeah. And I think that that's a really interesting thing. But that to me, what I did say was that for me to feel like I can actually answer that question, if I feel like it's balanced and maybe not equal, but equitable or whatever word you want to use in that, is, do you feel loved? Do you feel devoted to you? Mm-hmm. And then, do I feel that? And so we each get to decide and answer that question. And then, yes, it's balanced if we both feel loved.
Yeah. Or reciprocal.
Yeah. And I think that brought up a different conversation today, women's circle around feminine and masculine energy and what that looks like in relationship and what that looks like in devotion. Because I brought up our conversation and some of the input that I got from my sisters was that she used the analogy of a flower and the bees and how the flower attracts and the bees do all the work, essentially. And the bees come and they are devoted to the flower, and the flower in return is devoted as well, because it's a mutual mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
And there's like, you know, the bees come and they do, and they like spread things, and they, you know, there's a doing, and the flower is just being. And those are both masculine and then feminine qualities, feminine in the flower and masculine in the bees. And, you know, but the flower is nurturing the bees. And so there is like, that's another feminine quality, like the being and the nurturing, yeah.
Because, I mean, you know, in that analogy, there's that sense of, well, yeah, there's nothing for the bees to do if the flower isn't there to both pollinate and to return pollen to spread all over the place, right? Like,
yeah, and to eat, you know.
Right. Yeah, to sup of the nectar is a beautiful analogy. I like that. And it's funny to think about because, you know, there was part of me, I went on a really interesting parts journey yesterday myself, which is, I think, part of what brought this up, is I was thinking about,
Parts is, I just like to, in case this is somebody's first episode, we should probably do an episode about parts so that I can, so that we can like direct people to that one if you're unfamiliar with parts work. So there's, you know, another episode coming.
Yeah, maybe we could get someone to talk with us on that.
But cool. The parts work is, if you've ever seen a movie called Inside Out, it's a really good, and it's, you know, marketed as a kid movie, but it's like one of those movies that like everybody can watch and gain something. But the idea is that you have different emotional bodies, I guess, or emotional parts of you that have different beliefs and fears and things that motivate them. And so there's different parts inside of us that drive us and motivate us, or, you know, keep us safe. And so parts work is about diving into your inner world and having conversations with these parts, because some of them are holding on to it's like inner child work.
Yeah. That's what I did yesterday. Yeah. Like I was diving into my inner child with my coach, and he held the space for me to sit with my little guy, and my little guy was just feeling really like that the world was just unfair at that point. That I was like, I feel like I'm doing so much and I'm so tired all the time, and I just want to understand who is giving back to me. And that like, in that moment, there could have been a million questions that he asked, but what he asked was, can you see your adult self? Can you see the self that you are now walk into the room? What does he do? And I started crying. And I held my youngest self. And the thing that my coach said at the end was, good work, both of you. And so there was a little bit of that reciprocal energy or residual energy that I was thinking, like, what does it look like to be cared for, to be loved in the way that I love? Because I love really fiercely and intensely, sometimes triggeringly so.
Some might say.
Which, I don't know if we've had a full conversation about that on here yet, but...
well, it's that learning to accept new levels of love.
Right.
I forgot which episode that is, but I can link it.
Yeah. And yeah, that idea that I do love hard. And the question I get to ask myself is the question that I talked about with you yesterday then. So we were talking about masculine and feminine, and I realized in that moment, I was really jealous of the way that you treated yourself, with the level of love that you have for yourself and how much care that you take for you.
Was it like poked at, that particular like belief or realization poked at whenever because we were on the phone kind of talking about all this?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I think I'm going to stop at Chipotle, and then I also might go to Olive Garden and give myself a tiramisu, because...
No, it wasn't then, but that's awesome. Like, and that one was like, ooh. It was when you were like, something about taking a rose bath or something like that.
Oh, yeah. That was another thing I did that day.
Right.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, too.
I was like thinking about Valentine's Day and all these things that you were doing to take care of yourself, and I was like, here I am, working on my computer, like figuring out how to do the next blank amount of days, because I'm going to be supporting you in a particular way throughout the next few days. And I was just getting all shitty like with myself. But that was what's coming up, is realizing the way that I work in my masculine energy is to give. And I love giving. It's such an easy and wonderful way for me to show love. I show love in acts of service and physical touch, like the things that I do, right? But I guess the question that we talked about for a while was, what does that quote unquote fairness look like? Because technically, in the sense of the word, it's not fair in the traditional sense. Because fair often looks like 50-50.
Right.
And that's not necessarily what that means with the masculine and the feminine.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot in there that I would like to touch on, but most recently what I heard you say that's coming up is the way that you like to give, or that you express love and from your masculine is to give.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really, that was another one of the conversations that I just had in my the sister group around feminine and masculine. And I've said on a few different occasions that I feel like the way that things are set up in this world and the way that we live life, single household family.
Ooh, yeah.
And, mothering and like wiving, I guess is the right word. But like being a mother and being a wife is very masculine in a lot of ways, actually. Yeah. There's a lot of giving. Mm-hmm. And I believe that that's, a masculine trait, to give and to do and to provide. And
yeah,
there's a lot, there's a subtle difference between to provide and to nurture. There's a subtle difference there, but I think it's interesting, the idea to give, being a masculine trait, because I think because you think, okay, what's the opposite of giving? It's receiving. Mm-hmm. And the feminine is designed to receive.
Right.
And I think about that in a lot of different aspects. And there are so many women that I know that have incredible difficulty receiving.
Yeah.
And I think people in general kind of do, but, I see that a lot in women, and especially the women in my family, and just the examples that have been in my life of women, in the circles that I come to, and, different things where it's, oh, no, like brushing the attention off when somebody's trying to give affection or give, words of affirmation.
Right.
Or acknowledgement, it's brushed off really quickly, and like, oh, no, I can't receive that.
Right.
Is the message.
Well, it sounds like there's been like a topsy-turvy, upside down.
A what?
Topsy-turvy, like upside down, switcheroo. Like,
of course.
Of energies.
Yeah, because right? I think that, don't get me conspiracy started, but it's like, yeah. That's the design, we live in an upside down fucking world.
Right. Well, and the upside downness in this case in particular is that if the masculine is designed to give and the feminine is designed to receive, there was a point in our world in which the men gave to each other. But we live in a world where most men, the percentage I'm sure is astronomical, how many men don't really have communities of men that they bond truly and connect with, but they're supposed to give to each other. They're supposed to be in community with each other and lifting each other up, and not always expecting the feminine person in their life to be the sole giver.
True.
But because we live in single family homes, that's who we often look to. And it's like, I need you to give to me. And it's like, it's completely out of balance if you've then been giving all day to children and to chores and to home and to hearth and to all the things that women are expected to give to. Mm-hmm. And then men come home and they're like, okay, I'm ready to receive. And it's like, well, that's not, no. Mm-hmm. When you come home, I get to receive. But men don't receive from any source then. And so of course then men feel burnt out. They're giving to work, they're giving to their boss, they're giving to whatever, they're providing for their family, and then they feel like they're being slighted, which is, so it's just a lose-lose situation.
Yeah. And I think it's important too to like talk about feminine and masculine energy. Like if this is kind of your first exposure to that, it might be a little confusing.
Right. Yeah.
But like the idea and belief that I have and that we share, I suppose, is that there's feminine and masculine energy in every body.
Right.
And typically male-bodied individuals have more masculine, are dominant in their masculine energy.
Right.
However, they still have feminine energy, which is which ties back into that conversation of them feeling like they're not receiving anything.
Right.
And because there's that inner feminine in them. And the same goes for women. And there are also men who are more feminine, dominant, and vice versa for women.
Right.
But
and non-binary folks who still lean into an energy. So it is, every person is capable of leaning into any energy.
True.
That's what we can say.
Yep.
So in that, what we're talking about, when we say men or women, I realize it sounds like a generalization, but the truth is
it is a generalization, and
because generally it's true.
But and so take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, there's still those 15% of people who is not the case. So yeah, so whatever energy it is that you lean into, whether it's masculine or feminine, a lot of our understanding comes from a guy named David Data. He's an author that writes a couple books called Intimate Communion, and I've read Way of the Superior Man. He writes more than a couple books, quite a few. And I'm still on my masculine journey of understanding more about masculine energy. But there's a whole lot more people who are engaged in the feminine energy, right? Like there's a lot of authors, like you talk about Mama Gina all the time.
Yeah, the Pussy, a Reclamation book. That was where I got a lot of my information about feminine. She didn't even really talk about feminine energy. She just talked like energy specifically. It's more about like feminine essence and like what that looks like and feels like and shows up as and is ordained and not ordained, adorned. That's the right word. Like talking about like being pretty and not being pretty, but like doing things to make yourself feel pretty and feel rich and feel adorned in jewels and in beautiful clothing that is like makes you feel kind of sexy,
And that's what I think this concept of giving again comes from the masculine, that there's a sense that we are adorning you with love and affection and with jewels and with all the things that you feel adorned with. That obviously you get to do that for yourself. Obviously you get to love yourself and give to yourself. But when you have the masculine in his essence, that he is in service to his queen. And I love that. Like, I love that concept. I love that idea. I love how the way that it works out and plays out, because then I get to spoil you a little bit, and it's great. Like, I love that. That's my absolute favorite.
And another piece of the conversation that we had last night was, because I hadn't really learned exactly from other teachers about like the idea of devotion and is devotion meant to be equal. And so I just kind of was feeling into what I do know about feminine masculine energy and what feels right for me. And I was saying, I don't know that it's meant to be equal. I don't know that the level of doing in that aspect of devotion. But like feeling loved and feeling like you're being, nurtured. And that's the thing too, right? Is that like love and devotion from the feminine looks different than love and devotion from the masculine.
Yes.
And so it looks different. And
how does it look?
Well, I think like, nurturing is different than providing.
Right.
There's a subtle difference. They kind of mean the same thing in some aspects, and people's understandings would be interesting to look at the dictionary definition of those two words, honestly.
I love the dictionary.
But, nurturing it feels softer. And there's more presence and like beingness in that. And I think about like cuddling or something,
Okay, that's a very tangible example.
Yeah. And then providing, feels a little more energized and like directive.
Okay.
And bringing forth some like, providing food.
Right, or goods or whatever.
Yeah, a service or physical labor. It feels more like physical doing than like the nurturing being, which is feminine, masculine energy.
So that energy that is given from the feminine, like that's
it's
a
still
lot.
an energy exchange.
Exactly. And this is why it can feel not necessarily out of balance, but why I think this is why men have a hard time with it, is because men are not attuned to that energy. Masculine energy is like, paid attention to that, like when it's awoken and divine and inspired, yes.
Or not wounded.
Or not, yes. Yeah. But the majority of masculine right now are sitting in that space of woundedness, and they don't experience that energy because they literally can't feel it, because there's like a dam in between them and their emotions.
Yeah, and blocks, and a lot of healing that gets to be done around the way that men have been societally conditioned to disconnect from their body and their emotions. I talk a lot about that sort of thing happening with women, and it happens with men as well, just there's a different modality for that sort of disconnection. Just like not being in touch with your heart and your emotions, and therefore your energetic body.
Right. So what can we do about that?
Well, I think there was another piece to this that we were kind of talking about, and we're like, why don't we just record? Okay, so I feel like we've caught up to that point where we said, why don't we just record?
It's funny because I don't remember it.
Yeah,
I remember everything.
We were talking about a little bit about doing like couples work and couples retreats, or sharing this sort of information with couples, and doing yoni castings, and like the men providing that service for the women and being honored and receiving. And that's where some of the conversation around women not being able to receive being kind of a problem, because they're so used to giving in this backwards world. But like teaching this sort of information and what that could look like.
So it sounds like the start of it, at least for the feminine, is maybe someone should attend a pussy plaster party.
Or pussy plaster party.
Yeah. But truly, like,
check out episode 27.
Yes, please.
If you don't know what that is, and
got one upcoming soon.
Also, episode 23. We just got a lot of pussy plaster episodes that came out. One of them was like me explaining what it is and why somebody might be interested, and then the other one was kind of a similar situation, but also about like sisterhood, and that one's with my friend Leola. So definitely check that one out. Yeah,
and I'm sure there will be things on the way in the future from my end, but this is not my podcast. But I'm talking about the way in which I get to offer that space for the masculine as well, to really get in tune with his energy and become the superior man that he is meant to be. That's another David Data book reference.
Reference. There you go. I think another thing that we were talking about was the way that being a mother and being a wife, and I guess just being a woman in a partnership as well. Like, even if you don't have kids, I'd be curious if this is similar, but the way that it's set up to be very masculine, and also I haven't quite developed a hypothesis for what the reasoning behind this is, but maybe it's everybody. Do you feel like everybody wants control, like men and women?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Especially in our unhealed parts.
Yeah. Well, I think that I don't know, I've experienced like in partnership, there seems to be more, at least what I've witnessed in partnership, there seems to be more like controlling desire in the women that I've known anyway. And maybe, you can speak if you've seen
there's lots of control from the masculine side as well.
Yeah. I mean, but it comes out different,
Yes, it does.
And I'm thinking in regards to like the home, like your stereotypical like women's work at the home, and like
load the dishwasher this way.
The dishwasher, yeah, exactly. Like load the dishwasher this way, and so it's like kind of subtle in a way.
Yeah, and he's like,
or like, oh, you didn't fold the laundry right, or oh, you got to do this, or you use the wrong whatever, and so it's like being controlling about perfectionist.
Ooh.
And really, wanting certain things, and it's almost as if like. And even with the kids too, and the way that they provide for the kids or treat the kids, not doing it right, and so there's this like constant I mean, I hate to say it, but like nagging
Yeah.
that happens. And when we do that as the feminine, I think it just comes off as, you know, it's hard for them to receive.
Right.
And because it's done in an unproductive way.
Sure.
However, there's also like, you know, there's also this level of self-responsibility and taking responsibility for, I was like, I didn't want to say that word twice, for taking responsibility for like wanting control over something, because maybe they're, you know, gosh, I could go on a lot of spider webs right now, but like wanting control for something. And so controlling different aspects of things and essentially emasculating your partner because they're not doing it right, but they're trying to help, you know, they're trying to support and provide in doing these things, and you're unable to receive. And, you know, because your inability to receive, or because of the feminine, I don't know, I don't want people to feel like targeted.
No, it's okay.
But because of the feminine's inability to receive, it's like coming out sideways as like, you're not doing it right.
Right.
And it's just...
And the masculine's then response to that is like, well, fuck it.
I just won't do anything.
Yeah, I just won't do it. Yeah. That learned helplessness.
Right. And then you have an adult child
that you're also taking care of.
The woman is trying to take care of. Like I've heard that so many times in my friend group and in just the women that I talk to. You know, it's like taking care of a third child or a fourth child or whatever, and
it's too much.
It's infuriating.
Yeah,
but
what
we get to take self-responsibility too. Like there is, not to like, you know, it feels like victim blaming in a way, but it's like nobody's a victim here, but you get to take responsibility for how you've contributed to that. Yeah. As the feminine or the wife or what, you know.
Yeah. And then the masculine gets to take responsibility for not leading. And I'm not saying the masculine energy typically leads because there's a lot of that doing. Like we got to make decisions. We got to get stuff done. And I say that because what comes to mind is whenever I'm talking with you, you're like, just tell me what to do. Don't make me make any decisions whatsoever. And I'm like, great, can do. And that is a masculine trait. And honestly, it's really polarizing in a way that I use that word polarizing the way that David Data uses it, as in pushing the masculine and feminine ends of the spectrum far, which is a good thing. You want polarity in your relationship because you don't want too masculine because they relate by competing. You don't want too feminine because the way that they relate is different. It doesn't create
collaboration.
Yeah, exactly. And it can create collaboration, but it doesn't create collaboration and partnership and sexual union and all the things that come in a relationship. So I said that because I'm talking about how the masculine gets to take leadership in saying, instead of just letting that happen, instead of just rolling over, because that typically tends to be the masculine's response in this day and age, is just rolling over and be like, okay, whatever she says, you know, the old ball and chain, which is such a not helpful way to talk about your partner. Please don't ever say that. But the idea is, if the masculine were to stand and to say, I see you. I see that you want things done a certain way, and be able to hold space for that desire for control. This is funny that you say that, because I'm going to bring the Bible story in for a second. In the third chapter of Genesis, when God curses Adam and Eve for eating the apple that they weren't supposed to, he says your desire will be for your husband and you won't be able to have it. And so the idea that comes out of that a lot, that some people say, is that the desire is that the woman will want to be in charge of that, or the feminine will want to be in charge of that whole experience. And that's not the way that it's designed to be energetically. The masculine is designed energetically to lead. Now, leading doesn't mean you're going to do what I tell you to do no matter what.
Right. There's a lot of like nuance and gray area in these things. And like I had shared earlier with, I'm saying all this because I recognize that the conversation of masculine and feminine energy can be triggering to some. For sure. I know it was to me and still can be at times if I'm like thinking in certain ways, especially the way, I mean, a lot of our generation grew up in, the world of equality, and like anything you can do, I can do better. And I made a whole episode about that. It's episode number 21.
Yeah.
It's literally called Anything You Can Do, I Can Do Better.
Thanks, Mia Hamm.
From that like Mia Hamm and Michael Jordan commercial, and like equality. And it's like, that was really impactful to me in my journey as a little girl growing up, and like, okay, equality, it means that I have to like do as much and be as much to prove my worth as a woman, that we're equal. And it's like the bar was set really high, and it's just not, the bar was set in a different energy, in a different gender.
Yes.
And women are left trying to like make their way over there somehow.
Right.
Anyway, so I say, why did it
Your
work?
little disclaimer that's saying that I can realize it can be triggering.
Yeah, it can be triggering whenever we're talking about feminine, masculine energy and like leading. And, a lot of this feels like, this is backwards. We're going backwards in feminism. And even, I don't know, I think feminism took shit way on the other end of the spectrum. I don't necessarily believe in feminism.
I do.
Nobody shoot me. No, I think feminism is just the opposite of a patriarchy, and that's not right.
Interesting.
So I say all that because there's this idea within the world of equality that like, women can do whatever they want, and they don't need to be stay-at-home housewives and abide by the husband's leadership.
Which is true. Like, you don't have to be stay-at-home housewives. If you want to be, great. And the idea is, for me at least, that's what I say, is like, yes, you get to do what you want. And it's more helpful to do what you want in your feminine energy.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, if you listen to episode 21, if you're interested about this whole idea of like, because I do reference feminine, masculine energy in that episode, and equality and just stereotype stuff. There's a way that being a stay-at-home mom has been villainized.
That's true.
There's a way that being a devoted wife in a semi-traditional sense has also been villainized. And so I say all that because I don't think that that's right. Either. And yes, of course you can make whatever choices you want. And we're talking about feminine, masculine energy. And there's, interesting nuances there.
So many.
Because you were talking about leadership within the masculine. And yes, the masculine is designed to lead. However, you think about that as like the head. The head is the leading. But I've heard it being described as like, the man is the head of the family, but the woman is the neck. And so the feminine and the woman or the wife, whatever, these terms that people get upset about. It's like the woman is a subtle leader. Right. Because it's like which way, and it's like a conversation, and it is a collaboration, because if you didn't have a neck and you just, all you can do is look forward. Right. Maybe you turn your whole entire body to be able to look right and left. But like you have a neck that shows you different aspects and perspectives of the world, and that's the gift of the feminine.
Absolutely. And
that's my 10-minute disclaimer.
Perfect. I think one of the perfect things I say that kind of sums a lot of this up is the other element of the masculine energy being the head is that the feminine energy is the heart. Yeah. That you can't do things just with your head. I've done things with my head for a really long time all by itself without really engaging the heart. And that has not led to a lot of really wonderful experiences in my life. I've learned that lesson the hard way time and time again. And there's something sacred about, especially in connection with you as the divine feminine that you are, being able to hear your heart and letting that inspire, influence, and guide the decisions that I then make. And I've even gone so far as to like, I'm taking extensive notes about like, okay, what are the ways in which she's guiding? Like, what are the things that like, she likes this, doesn't like this, she pays attention to this, doesn't pay attention to this. And you and I have even been like discussing what our individual values are and what our collective values are. And so I've led but only in the sense that I'm taking into consideration all of the factors and not just thinking my leadership is, I think with my head, this is what's best, so this is what we are doing, which isn't really helpful. And also, like, we aren't raising children together, so that changes a very different, like, aspect of that as well, because currently I'm leading our relationship, which is very different from leading your relationship and a household.
Right.
That's a whole different element. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, like what you were saying about taking, you know, my thoughts and my heart into perspective, you know, I just think about the, you know, we're talking about family chores, the household chores, and the, like, oh, you're not doing it right, the typical, you know, stereotypical nagging. But it's like, what if we could actually hear that? What if we could have a productive conversation about that? Like, okay, she's on my back again because I didn't fold the laundry the right way. It's like, okay, is it possible that there's a reason that she likes it folded that certain way? Could you get curious about the reason?
Yes. Instead of trying to be right.
Like, well, I did it and I helped you, you know?
Get defensive.
And that whole idea of like help and babysitting, like, don't get me fucking started.
Yeah. Men do not babysit. They are watching their actual children. So don't do that. And then, yes, we are as much a part of the home as anybody is. And so we get to do our part. And yes, maybe everyone's part looks differently, right? Like, like we talk about equal, quote unquote, but not really. We talk about the ways in which we do our things. I love to cook. It's so much fun. I love making food. I love creating that way. I fucking hate doing dishes, or I have in the past really hated doing dishes.
I love doing dishes.
You love doing dishes. And so we figured that out, right? Like, again, we don't necessarily live in the same house, but we've figured out certain things. And because what our value is I get to lead from my masculine, you get to receive in your feminine, and we get to have those conversations. Yeah.
La la la. The shoe fits.
Yeah. So if you want to learn more about what it looks like to be in those different kinds of energies, well, first of all, we suggest the books that we talked about that we link in the podcast notes. Check out the podcasts that we've also recorded around this too. And then really, like, I know that your experience in doing yoni casting has really empowered a lot of women and the way, and feminine folks, because of the way that particular ritual brings out their connection to their divine feminine. Because truly, you know, the pussy is a portal to the divine.
Well, it's like a deeper connection too with your body.
Yeah.
And you said the heart is feminine, and I mean, I think that's leaving out a huge portion, which, like, the body is the feminine.
Absolutely.
The body is very intuitive and feeling, and
beautiful.
All right. I think we're coming to a beautiful natural close here.
I hear that, and, like, I would like to say we should press the stop button. You know, that's me leading a little bit.
What? If you found parts of this podcast interesting, useful, or at the very least entertaining, I hope that you'll share your takeaways and tag me on social media, or leave a review. And we appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.